Hello friends, welcome to this channel. This session is actually one of the most important session I say. It is very popular subject at the exam. It is Amazon S3. Amazon S3 powers the biggest website in the world and you probably don't even know about it. Many websites in the world will use Amazon S3 as a backbone. I hope you all guys are excited about it. In this session, we are going to learn many things about Amazon S3 like Amazon S3 buckets and objects, and after that we will do hands-on in S3 console. Then we will see Amazon S3 versioning and also will do demo of it. Then Amazon S3 encryption and also we will do hands-on in Amazon S3 console. So S3 is a system, a service that allows us to store objects, so files into buckets or directories, and each bucket must have a globally unique name, as you will see in the hands-on. So we cannot create a bucket that are already being taken in terms of names. The buckets are defined at the regional level. So even though S3 is a global service, buckets are regional resource and there is a naming convention which includes no uppercase, no underscore, 3 to 63 character long. It should not be an IP and it must start with a lowercase letter or a number. Okay. Now in this S3 buckets, we need to create objects. And objects are files and they must have a key. And what is a key? It is the full path to that file. So if we have a bucket named my bucket and of objects named my underscore file dot txt, then the key is my underscore file dot txt. It is the blue part. But if we have folder structures within our S3 buckets, so my underscore folder, one another folder. And in my file.txt, the key is the full path. So that's again, the entire thing is blue. And the key can be decomposed in two things, the key prefix and object name. So if we take the same long example, the prefix for my underscore file.txt is my underscore file 1 slash another folder slash, okay, that is the prefix, whereas the object name is my underscore file.txt. So even though there is no concept of directories within buckets, just very long key name, then the UI will try to trick you into thinking otherwise, because we could not create quote unquote create directory within S3. So what we really have in S3 is just keys with very long names that contain slashes. Okay, so now let's go again for this object. So the object's values are the content of the body. So a maximum object size on Amazon S3 is 5 terabytes. So 5000 gigabytes with which is huge object, but you cannot upload more than 5 gigabytes at a time. So that means that if you want to upload a big object of 5 terabyte, you must divide that object into parts of less than 5 gigabytes and upload these parts independently into what's called a multi-part upload. Now, each object in Amazon S3 can have metadata. So it lists of key value pairs that could be a system or user metadata, and this is to add information onto your objects and also tags. You can also have key value pairs and tags, which is very useful when you don't have security on your objects or lifecycle policies. Finally, we will see when we go into versioning that there is a version ID onto our Amazon S3 objects, and we will see what the value of that is in the versioning lecture. Okay, so now let's go into the Amazon S3 console, and here we can view our all buckets and we can create our first bucket. So I will go ahead and click on create buckets. Next, we have to give our buckets name, and the name has to be globally unique across all accounts in AWS. So if I name my bucket demo, even though there was no demo buckets in my account, scroll all the way down and click on create buckets. I'm going to get an error saying that's the bucket with the name with same name already exists. So I must choose a name that's going to be globally unique in AWS. I can do a demo AWS S3 bucket 2022. I think this is good enough. Next, we have to choose a region. So choose a region that's close to you. For me, I'm going to choose US East 1, but you have to choose a region for your bucket. But the Amazon S3 console is global. It does not require a region selection. So don't mistake it. S3 is not global service. It is a global console. But you need to select a region for your S3 buckets. Okay, great. Then I'm going to scroll down and we have the block public access setting. For now, I'm going to keep them on and we will discuss them when we go into defining our S3 buckets policy and some security around the buckets. And so what we'll do is just keep this setting because we will view versioning and so on later, and then we will click on create buckets. So our first bucket has been created, and now I can click on it and explore the S3 console together. So when we get there, we get we get to the buckets level view, and as we can see we have objects, properties, permissions, metrics, management and access point. We will view a lot of those in this session, but for now what I want to do is to go ahead and create and upload our first objects in AWS Amazon S3. So I'm going to click on upload and then add file, and I'm going to upload my file called coffee.jpg from document, and I'm going to scroll down and look at the different setting we have. So as you can see we have a destination which is my buckets right here, and we can view the fact that the versioning for now is disabled. We will talk about versioning later on. We can do other setting and we could look at additional uploads option, but for now let's keep it simple and just click on upload. We will see a lot of this setting later on. Okay, so the object has been uploaded, and so if I click back on my S3 bucket, I can see that the objects now shows the number 1. So there is one object in my buckets, it's coffee.jpg file, and it has been uploaded just right now. Okay, so now let's open this file and have a look at some of this detail. So how about we try to open this file? So there are two ways to open a file in Amazon S3. The first one is to simply click on this open option. And if we do so, this opens a new tab, and this new tab is showing us the coffee picture we are expecting. So this is great. The second way to open a file in Amazon S3 is to use the public object URL, which is right here. So if I copy this object URL, open the new tab and paste this URL, what do I found? I found that there is an access denied. So this is a bit weird, right? Well, the idea is that here we are able to access it and here not. Why so? Well, in the third tab, so this tab, we are using the public URL of our objects, and it turns out that our S3 buckets is not public. So right now this is not public, therefore when I try to access any URL on my buckets, it will not work and it gives me an access denied. It's because my bucket is not public. Okay, so back into our bucket, let's try to create a folder. For example, I'm going to create the image folder, and then I will create that folder, and then within that folder what I can do, for example, is upload another file. I can add file and upload this beach.jpg, for example, and then click on upload. And here we go, my file has been uploaded. So now if I navigate a little bit, my buckets, as you can see, I am into the roots of my buckets, and then I am into the key is named images, and within it I find my beach.jpg. And if I wanted to open the beach.jpg the same way we did it from before, okay, pretty good. Now finally what we can do is go back, so we can see coffee.jpg and the folder images. Click on this folder, delete, and then delete everything within that folder. As you can see, it is a permanent delete, so it says typing permanently delete to delete the objects and the folder. So this has worked, this has been deleted. I can click on exit in the top right corner, and here we go. We have had our first introduction to Amazon S3, in which we have created a bucket, uploaded a file, viewed that file, and played a little bit with folders and deleting objects, right? So now let's talk about Amazon S3 versioning. So your file in Amazon S3 can be versioned, but it has to be enabled first at the bucket level. So we will do this in the hands-on. So that means that if you are upload a file version with the same key, then it will overwrite it, but it will not overwrite it. Actually, it will create a new version of that file. So instead of overwriting the file that already exists, it will create a new file version, and I am simplifying it here, but it will be version 1, then version 2, then version 3, and etc, etc. So it is best practice to version your buckets in Amazon S3 in order to be able to have all the file versions for a while, because you can get protected against unintended deletes, because you are able to restore a previous version, and also you can easily roll back to any previous version you wanted. So you need to know a few things through any file that is not versioned prior to enabling versioning will have the version null. And if you suspend versioning in your bucket, it does not delete the previous versions, it will just make sure that the future files do not have version assigned to it. So let's go in the hands-on and see how that works. Now, let's explore versioning in our S3 buckets. So for now, we just uploaded a coffee.jpg and we did not enable versioning when we created the buckets. But let's go into the properties tab, and the first setting into the properties tab is called bucket versioning. So let's edit it and move the buckets versioning from being suspended to being enabled. I'll click on save change and here we go. Our bucket is now enabled for versioning. So let's choose this and go back into our objects. Great. So this is our first object. But now that we have enabled versioning, we have a new setting here called list versions. This toggle right here, if I click on it, will add a column into the view of Amazon S3, which shows me the version ID. And it turns out that's for coffee.jpg. The version ID is null. That means that we have uploaded these objects before we enabled versioning onto our bucket, and therefore it will not have a version ID, hence the term null. But let's try to upload a new file, and this time we are going to upload the beach picture. So beach.jpg, I'll scroll down and upload. Now that file has been uploaded, let's go back to our bucket and list diversions. Now we can find that the beach.jpg has a version that is very long string, and so this makes sense as we have uploaded a version of the file after enabling bucket versioning. It's going to be assigned a version ID. Okay, what about if we uploaded the beach.jpg file again? So let's upload beach.jpg and see what happens. Okay, back in here I still have two objects, but if I list my versions, now we can see that beach.jpg has two versions ID. This one is one we applied from before, and this one is the new version ID we just uploaded right now. So as we can see, thanks to versioning, every time we re-upload a file, it will keep all its previous version as well as the new version and assign a different version ID every single time. So this is cool. Now what happens if we upload another time the coffee.jpg file? So let's try it out. We will upload the coffee.jpg. Upload. Great. Back in here, list versions. We can see that coffee.jpg has two versions now. The first version that we just uploaded and long version ID, and the one from before has the version ID null. Okay, this is great. Now let's try to unleash the object version. So we just have these two files right here, and let's try to delete the file. So for example, let's take the beach.jpg and let's try to delete it. So I click on delete, and as you can see, we get an information saying deleting the specified objects adds delete marker to them. So we are actually not deleting the file itself, we are adding a delete marker. Let's see whether it's been so. Let's confirm we want to delete beach.jpg and press delete. Okay, so this is done. The object has been successfully deleted. Let's exit this. Scroll down and yes, it seems that my beach.jpg has been deleted, but actually if I click on list version, this toggle again, well, we can see that beach.jpg is still here. But now on top of the two previous version we have uploaded, we have delete marker. and this delete marker has its own version ID of size 0 byte and is same to AWS, make it seem like this file is gone, but actually it is not gone. It just has a delete marker. And so how can I restore a file? Well, I can just take this and delete the delete marker. Now, deleting a delete marker or deleting a specific version ID is called a permanent delete. So, if I take, for example, these two files right here, these two version and delete marker and the previous version, because I want to delete two at once, I click on delete. Now, instead of just saying delete, it says you need to permanently delete because I am deleting specific version ID. So it is a destructive operation before it edited delete marker. But not we are actually deleting the objects for good. So this cannot be undone. I click on delete objects and my object has been deleted. Going back into my buckets, one more time, what do we see? We see my beach and my coffee.jpg are big, and if I list version, I only have one version for my beach.jpg, which makes sense. This is exactly in line with the operation we just did. Okay, and so this allows us to roll back a previous version and restore a previous version thanks to this versioning. Okay, and this is quite cool because, well, if someone goes and deletes a file and we have enabled versioning, as long as it deletes a specific object version, we have prevented again unintended delete. And finally, for bucket versioning, you could go and disable it. It is not suspended, so if you do suspend it, this is going to keep all the previous version that you had from before, but for the new object they will have in version ID of null, and we will replace all the existing previous version. Okay, now I am going to keep bucket versioning on because I need it for the rest of my demos. So that's it for this part. I hope you all guys are now clear with this part. So now let's talk about Amazon S3 encryption for your objects. The idea is that you upload objects onto Amazon S3 and these are served of AWS, and so you may want to make sure that these objects are not accessible. For example, if someone gets into the Amazon servers, or you want to make sure you get adhere to some security standards set up by your company. So as such, Amazon gives you four methods to encrypt objects in Amazon S3. The first one is called SSE S3. This is to encrypt S3 objects using keys handled and managed by AWS. The second one is SSE KMS, to leverage AWS Key Management Service to manage your encryption keys. The third one is SSEC, when you manage your own encryption keys. And finally, client-side encryption. Now we are going to do a deep dive on on all of those, so don't worry. And it is important to understand which ones are adapted to which situation for the exam, because the exam will definitely ask you question to choose the right level of encryption based on the scenario. So let's do a deep dive first on SSE S3. This is an encryption where the keys used to encrypt the data are handled and managed by Amazon S3. The object is going to be encrypted server side. SSE means server side encryption, and it's the type of encryption is AES 256, which is in logarithm. So for this to upload an objects and sets to the SSE S3 encryption, you must set a header called XAMZ server side encryption. AES 256 XAMZ stand for X Amazon. So X Amazon, a server side encryption AES 256, and this is how you remember the name of the header. So let's have a look. We have an objects and it is unencrypted. We have it written out and we want to upload it into Amazon history and perform some SSE S3 encryption. So for this, we are going to upload the objects onto Amazon S3. You can use the HTTP protocol or the HTTPS protocol. And you can add the editor that we said, the X Amazon server side encryption AES 256 and then Amazon S3. Thanks to this header, known that it should apply its own S3 managed data key, and using the S3 managed key and the object, some encryption will happen and the object will be stored encrypted into your Amazon S3 buckets. Very simple, but here in this instance, the data key is entirely owned and managed by Amazon S3. Okay. Next, SSE KMS. So we have not seen what KMS is right now. We will see us pretty much toward the end of this course on the security side, but KMS is Key Management Service, which is an encryption service for you. So SSE key KMS is when you have your encryption keys that are handled and managed by the KMS service. Why will you use KMS over SSE free? Well, it gives you control over who has access to what keys and also gives you an audit trail. Each object is going to be again encrypted server side, and for this to work we must set the header X Amazon service side encryption to be a value Amazon Web Service KMS. So the idea is that exactly the same, because it is the server side encryption. We have the object we have uploaded using HTTP and N, the header, and then using this header, Amazon S3 knows to apply the KMS customer master key you have defined on top of it. And using this customer master key, so the key of defined and your objects, there is some encryption that will happen and the file will be stored in your S3 buckets under the SSE KMS encryption key. Next, we have SSEC, that stands for server side encryption using the keys that you provide yourself outside of the AWS. So in this case, Amazon S3 does not store the encryption key you provide. So it will absolutely have to use it because it needs to do encryption for then that key will be discoverable. For this, to transmit the data into AWS, you must use HTTPS because you are going to send a secret to AWS, and so you must have encryption in transit. Encryption key must be provided in the HTTP headers for every HTTP request made because it is going to be discarded every single time. So we have the object and we want to have it encrypted in Amazon S3. But we want to provide ourselves the client side data key to perform the encryption. So we send both of these things over HTTPS. So it's an encrypted connection between you, the client, and Amazon S3. And the data key is in the header. So therefore Amazon S3 receive the exact same object, and the client provides data key. And then again, it is server side encryption. So Amazon S3 will perform at the incorporeal using these two things and store the encrypted data, encrypted object into your S3 buckets. If you wanted to retrieve that file from Amazon S3 using SSCC, you would need to provide as well the same at client side data key that was used. So it requires a lot more management on your end because you manage to do the data keys, and Amazon or AWS in general does not know which data keys you have used. So it's bit more involved. Okay, and then finally client side encryption. So it is when the clients, so you encrypt the file, encrypt the object before uploading it into Amazon S3. Some client libraries can help you do this. For example, the Amazon S3 encryption clients is a way to perform that client side encryption. And as I said, clients must encrypt data before sending it to S3. And then, in case you receive data that is encrypted using client side encryption, also CSE, then you are solely responsible for decrypted the data yourself as well. So you need to make sure you have the right key available. So as I said, in client side encryption, the customer managed entirely the key and the encryption cycle. So let's have an example. Amazon S3 Amazon S3 this time is just the buckets where it's not doing any encryption for us because it is client side encryption, not server side encryption. And so in the client side, we will use encryption SDK. For example, the S3 encryption SDK will provides the objects and our client side data key. The encryption will happen client side. So the object is going to be fully encrypted on the client side. And then we are going to just upload that already encrypted object into Amazon S3. Okay, so that's the four type of encryptions. Hopefully that makes sense. And I have been monitoring encryption in transit in this lecture, and I will make it very clear what it is. That's around SSL and TLS connections. So Amazon S3 is initiative the service, and it exposes HTTP endpoint that is not encrypted, and it exposes HTTPS endpoint which is encrypted and provide what's called encryption in flight, which relies on SSL and TLS certificates. So you are free to use the endpoints you want, but if you use the console, for example, you would be using HTTPS, and most client would by the way use HTTPS endpoint by default. And so if you are using HTTPS, that means that there is data transfer between your clients and Amazon S3 is going to be fully encrypted, and that's what's called encryption in transit. And one thing to know is that in case you are using SSEC, so server side encryption, and the key is provided by your clients, then HTTPS is mandatory. Encryption in flight is also called SSL TLS because it is uses SSL and TLS certificates. So now let's go into the hands-on to see how encryption works now. Now let's look at encryption setting. So we will go into the coffee.jpg file, and I am going to scroll down, and let's have a look at the encryption setting. So as we can see, For server-side encryption setting, right now there is default encryption disable and server-side encryption none. So our object is not encrypted. Now we could edit it and encrypt it in place, but I want to show you how it's done as well when we upload a file. So let's go ahead and upload a new file. I will add a file and I will add again the coffee.jpg file. Now we will scroll down and I will look at additional option for encryption. So let me scroll down. We are getting into the server side encryption setting. I will click on enable and here we have different kind of option. So obviously we disable it and this is no service at encryption which was the default from before, or we can enable it. So the first encryption type we have seen and learned from is SSE S3. In case we are using an Amazon S3 key and this is an encryption key that Amazon S3 will create, manage and use for us. So fairly easy. This is what we could do and we could just go ahead and create that file. For example, with Amazon S3 key. So let's scroll down, upload it and that's it. We have uploaded a file with encryption of SSE S3. Now let's do it again but for the beach.jpg. So let's add a file and go for beach.jpg and I'm going to expand the additional upload option. Scroll down, enable server side encryption and the second option is AWS KMS key. So SSE KMS. In that case, as we have seen, we still have an encryption key, but this time that encryption key is protected by the KMS service. And here we have a couple of options. We could use an AWS managed key with which is AWS S3 and this would be an easy option. Or you can choose from your own KMS master key if you want to create your own key, which we will not to do right now. Or if the key is not in another account, we could enter the KMS master key ARN. Amazon resource is named manually in there, but to keep this thing simple, we are going to use Amazon managed key AWS S3 and this is going to make sure that the key encryption happens by doing API calls into the KMS service. Okay, so let's upload this file again. Okay, now if we exit this, let's have a look at what we have. So we have 5 object versions. So we have different coffee.jpg, we have different beach.jpg, and so we could look at specific object versions in particular. So if we look at the beach.jpg we just had and the one from before, let's have a look at what the encryption says. So this is the one I just uploaded, and if we look at the encryption setting, it's encrypted with AWS KMS master key, so SSE KMS. And if I did look at the piece.jpg we had from before, when we first upload that file, if I scroll down, as you can see, server side encryption is none. So what this means that the encryption setting is just for a specific file and its specific version ID. But this will make sense. So we can upload this file manually and specify the encryption setting for each file. Or if we wanted to, we could, for example, go into properties and specify a default encryption mechanism for the buckets. So how do we do it? Well, for example, let's edit this default encryption setting. So here we go. I will edit it and we will enable server-side encryption by default. And let's see, we want the default every single object to be uploaded with the Amazon S3 key. So we will use this, save the changes, and now let's try to upload a file without any encryption. So let's have a look. So we will go to objects, upload it, and I'm going to upload a coffee.jpg file, but I'm not specifying any encryption. But as we can see, the default encryption is enabled. Okay, but if I go into additional upload option, I'm saying encryption to use the default encryption bucket setting. And so as you can accept, if I upload this file, what is going to happen? Well, let's have a look. I'm going to click on this file ID right here and look at the kind of server side encryption setting it has. Yes, it has an Amazon S3 master key. So the default encryption setting worked properly. And so lastly, you may be asking me, hastily when you thought us about more setting, to encrypt file. So why don't we see them? So let's have a look. If I go into the option and look at overriding, as we can see, we have Amazon S3 key, so SSE S3 or SSE KMS. Another one we have learned is SSEC, and we can only do this through the CLI because we have to pass in an encryption key into AWS securely to anchor that object. So this is not something that has developed to be done through the console at this time. So it's not accessible to us. So the SSEC option is not going to be shown. And the last option I showed you, it was called client side encryption. And client side encryption, it means that we need to encrypt object client side. So on your own computer before uploading an Amazon S3. And so Amazon S3 does not really care if it is encrypted or not. It will just take all the bytes anyway. And so this is why this option does not show anything here as well. So that makes sense. This is where we can only see SSES3 and SSEKMS. So that's it for this session. In this session, we show what is Amazon S3, S3 buckets and objects, S3 versioning, and then in last, we show the Amazon S3 encryption, right? I hope you all guys are now clear with it. Thank you for watching. Bye and have a nice day.